Hello. I'm just making sure my camera's not uneven. I just felt like letting off some steam randomly in the middle of the night, like you do. So, I apologize if you were expecting something more, I don't know, well articulated, but I'm going to do my best to just share some of the things that I've been thinking, and hopefully people who feel similarly can feel comfort in someone sharing their thoughts, and those who disagree can maybe be, you know, productive in sharing why instead of just saying something negative or condescending. If you're mean in the comments, I'm just going to block you from my channel and you will lose the ability to leave comments in the future. So don't be an a-hole and you'll be fine. That is entirely on you. I'm not responsible for what you choose to say, but this is my channel, and I want to make sure that there isn't just free-floating hostility in my comments. So I do have one person with like 50 million different accounts who usually shows up and says something negative, and I know it's the same person for reasons I don't feel like getting into, but it's obvious that it's the same person. So if that person shows up, I will be blocking as many accounts as they try to comment from, but hopefully they don't. I'm going to try not to engage. I always say that, and then I end up getting annoyed and engaging anyway, but I'm going to try to just stay focused on what I'm saying. So without further ado, let's get into this. I need a drink. Sorry. So, there are a lot of things I could have titled this video, because there are a lot of things I want to talk about. There are so many different topics on my mind all the time, and I think when I'm feeling really passionate about a specific topic, that is the best time for me to go live, or to just make any kind of content about it. Talk when you have something to say. Don't just let it fester. Don't let your thoughts stir. Share them if you can. So, I try my best to share my thoughts on my channel. Usually nobody watches. If by chance somebody does tune in and watch, then cool, I get a comment. And if not, then I can count on at least one of my subscribers who always comments eventually, saying something after the fact. But and she's always very supportive. I love her. She's her name's Cheryl, and she's always commenting on my videos. And it's odd. This is me going off on a tangent, but it's odd that, like, I don't even know her, and she's like the only person who always comments every time I do a video, because the people that I do know in my life, family, friends, nobody, there are hardly any people in my social circle, which is actually quite large. I have a lot of friends and family, and I never see anybody watching or commenting on my content. And I don't know if it's because they don't know it's there, or because they don't, maybe they're intimidated by the length of it or something. Hello. How you doing? But I don't know. It is what it is. I just every now and then I'm like, that is odd that the one person who always comments is a stranger to me. But I do have somebody else who just commented hi, and I don't know who that is, so that's at least not by the name, but that's nice. So, yeah, let's get into the topic. So, what are some of the thoughts I've been having lately? I was just watching a video that I think came out a day or two ago called George Carlin wasn't trying to be funny, or something like that. Something to that effect, where it's like 40 minutes long and this guy is making a video saying a bunch of things about George Carlin. I watched the whole thing. None of it was new to me. George Carlin is actually the guy on my shirt, just by chance. I didn't wear this on purpose. um, it was just clean, so I put it on. But I my other clothes are in the dryer. So literally this was just what I was wearing by chance. I like George Carlin. I have two shirts that have his face on it. One of them has his older face, and this one isn't. You know, it's a painting of him when he was younger. But he is a comedian who most people say that he wasn't really a comedian. He was a philosopher with a sense of humor, and I like that because what I find interesting is a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum, conservatives, liberals, left, right, Democrat, Republican, however you want to think of it, they often think that he's on their side. And they like to say, he would be on our side with this, or he agrees with me on this, this, and this. But the truth is, George Carlin was the odds of him actually agreeing with you are very low. So I watched this 40-minute video and I didn't really learn anything from it because I am a little bit of a George Carlin nerd, and the reason for that is that the moment I discovered him, the moment I actually started watching his content, I felt like I was listening to someone articulate exactly how I was feeling and what I was thinking. He A lot of people say they don't agree with everything he says. They're like, "Well, I agree with him on this, this, and this, but not this, this, and this." I can't say that. There really isn't anything that I disagree with him on. I can't think of anything that he said that I was like, "Oh, I don't know how I feel about that." The guy just was a genuine genius, and the way that he saw things was so um, unbiased. And I think the main reason for that is that he managed to detach from feeling like he was part of what's going on in the world. He became an outsider, just a neutral observer. And, a lot of people thought that he was like a bitter old man. But the truth is, he wasn't a bitter, angry old man. He was disappointed in seeing all the ways that we've um, squandered our potential, but he isn't angry about it, because to say that he's angry suggests that he has some sort of desired outcome that he isn't getting, or that he thinks he can get if he just tries a little harder, and that he's angry that he's failing at it. But the truth is, he doesn't care about the outcome. He didn't anyway. He's dead. But he managed to just detach and watch from a neutral lens, and he decided that he didn't have a stake in the outcome of humanity, of Earth, of the universe, of anything. And I want to elaborate on that a little bit before I start getting into the title, which is Conservative Hypocrisies. There are a few things that I've been thinking about recently that I thought, wow, that is incredibly inconsistent and hypocritical. And I would love to point some of these things out, but first I want to brief you on the other things that are on my mind. So, my thoughts on George Carlin's philosophy, I think that in order to acknowledge the reality of the collective situation that the human species is in, we have to think about comparing it to the individual situation that we're in. So on an individual level, we all know that we're going to die. Nobody can pretend that they're immortal. You could die tomorrow, you could die in a couple hours, you could die in a couple minutes if just randomly you just have a heart attack, or you slip and fall, or somebody breaks into your house and you had no idea that they were 5 minutes away, and then all of a sudden they shoot you. You could just have somebody snipe you out through your window because somebody paid somebody to do it and you didn't even know you had it. You know what I mean? Like, anybody could die at any moment for any unimaginable reason. You can't always think about it and figure it out and plan for it. You're never completely safe. But we still go on every day and we still function, we still live, even though we know that at some point it's going to stop. We're going to die. And if we truly believed that when we die, everything we ever did became completely meaningless and there was no point to any of it, why would we bother living in the first place if we thought that our death would just make it completely null and void? On some level, whether we admit it to ourselves or not, we know that the decisions we make while we're alive are relevant, they're important, and they're not erased by the end of our life. Because we see things, this is evident in just what we observe. We see things all the time that end, and yet we still are largely impacted by them. just because something ends doesn't mean that it shouldn't have ever existed in the first place, or that it had no reason to exist. And it's for that reason that I don't think there will ever come a time in the universe, in life, in existence, where nothing exists. I think there will always be something, because if we ever did reach a point where nothing existed, then it actually would be all pointless. Because if eventually everything is going to stop existing, then there will be nothing left, nothing to even be impacted by anything. And the whole universe would be completely pointless, because it would be as if it never existed. There would be no proof that it existed. There would be nothing left behind. We'd just be in nothing. And then it would be as if that it might as well have always been that way. But it couldn't have, because if there was ever a time when nothing existed, it would have stayed that way. Because nothing, if it truly is nothing, can't change anything. It can't create a universe. So if there was ever nothing, it would have just remained nothing, and there would still be nothing right now. So the fact that there is something tells me that there was always something, and the fact that, there was always something suggests the it suggests the concept of infinity, which also would lead you to believe that there will always be something. You could almost draw the conclusion that there's no such thing as nothing. So, what I find interesting about that is that we know that on a larger scale, on a grand scale, the universe will always exist, and we know that when we die, other people will exist, and usually that's how we justify our lives having meaning, is how they affect other people. But on a grand scale, let's say you're thinking about the extinction of the human species. How do you justify that? How do you make yourself feel comfortable with the thought of that happening? Well, as far as you're concerned, the human species going extinct, when you die, it's going to make no difference to you. When you die, you don't care what you're leaving behind, unless you do. I mean, that's the thing. Nobody really knows what happens when we die. We all have our own ideas. We all have our own theories and beliefs. But people don't generally know. There is no agreed upon answer, universally agreed upon answer to what happens when we die. And there are some people who believe that when they die, it will not matter what they leave behind. They won't care anymore. They'll just be gone. I don't believe that's the truth, because like I said, I believe in infinity. And I also believe that our consciousness is something more than our physical bodies. I don't really believe that we're just a complex program, like a robot with the illusion of consciousness and free will. I think that consciousness is something entirely separate, and it will go on beyond our human form. So that's just my own theory. But what about the reincarnation? Do you believe in that? Yeah. So, I think that if you believe that you die and you just stop existing, it suggests the question, what difference would it make if the entire species died, or if just you died? In both cases, you're dying. And in both cases, you don't exist afterwards, so it's as if nothing matters. You're not going to be around to care what happens. So why is one worse than the other, as far as you're concerned, on an individual level? And I think we need to realize that either way, even if life goes on after death, even if you don't just stop existing when you die, we have to start making peace with the things we cannot control. You can't control, as I mentioned earlier, when you're going to die. You could slip and fall in the shower tomorrow. You could live another 50 years. You could choke on your food. There are a million ways that you could just randomly die at any given moment, and it's not always up to you. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's negotiable. Sometimes you get that gut feeling and you're like, not turning that way in traffic, or I'm not gonna, a good example of this is the psychic medium Alison Dubois. When she was a kid, I want to say she was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old. Alison Dubois is famous for working with the police and helping solve cases, and she got her own TV show where she wasn't in it. It was Patricia Arquette playing her, but she was famous for solving police cases. But she told a story of what happened when she was a little kid, where she was going to sleep one night and she heard a voice say, "Move your bed." So she moved her bed from one side of the bedroom to the other side of the bedroom, and she went to sleep. And that same night, a car came plowing into her bedroom right where her bed was before, and she would have died had she not moved her bed. This type of stuff happens all the time, and people don't realize it. People don't always attribute it to psychic mediumship or intuition or anything. People don't always say, I heard a voice say move your bed. Sometimes it's just a feeling. Sometimes you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna rearrange my furniture a little bit. And you don't always make the connection, but when you narrowly avoid something like that, you are in a state of shock and you feel so lucky that you're alive. And it happens all the time. People narrowly avoid death because there are other forces out there trying to protect you. And sometimes people tune that out. So you might hear a voice say, move your bed, and say, I'm keeping my bed where it is. You can't tell me what to do. You just dismiss it, and then you die. And that also happens all the time. Um, and unfortunately, that happens a lot more frequently than people listening to their intuition. But because generally people are pretty stubborn and people are pretty stupid, which was another thing George Carlin loved to point out, is that he said, think of how stupid the average person is, and realize half of them are stupider than that, which is an unfortunate reality we have to deal with, and we're constantly reminded of it, especially in the United States, I think is where, like, it's like the peak of stupidity. Um, I think the rest of the world sees the United States the way the United States sees Florida, which is kind of an interesting comparison, but I feel like it's pretty accurate. Um, it's just like it's just there, and it's just filled with some really insanely stupid types of people who make the strangest decisions. Um, and we stand out so much. We're the only country that still uses Fahrenheit. There's a lot of things that we do that make us weird, and we think it makes sense. We're like, yeah, but this is the better way to do it. But like, we spell words differently. We do a lot of weird stuff. We use different units of measurement, like miles instead of kilometers, and all this stuff. Like, there's like such a long list of things the U.S. does that no other country, no other civilized nation does. And we are so stubborn that we won't bend. And it's really interesting to see so many people dug into their comfort zones, their familiarity, to the point where they would, you know, deny other human beings um, basic human rights just because they're made uncomfortable by it. So that's sort of, what the problem is in the US, is people focusing a lot on their own personal comfort. And I'm going to get into how that happened in the first place and why it's still that way, and generally the systems that are in place that are going on. This is, again, this guy talked about that a lot. But for now, I'm going to wrap up what I was saying about, like, philosophy. So I would recommend that we start shifting our focus to an individual level, because what happens in life when we learn a lesson? You go through an experience, you learn something, you're thinking, okay, I just had this traumatic experience, and then I came out the other side smarter, better, more capable of protecting myself in the future. And I learned what not to do, and it was really hard to come out of that. It was really hard to get back up on my feet after being knocked down, but I did it, and I'm here now. And now I can teach what I learned and share everything with other people. That's what we generally do in life, is we share what we learn as we learn it. You go through something, you learn a lesson, you want others to learn it too. You get out of a hole, you want to reach back into that hole and pull out everybody else. It's a natural instinct. It's in our nature to want to help other people. It isn't natural to crawl out of a hole and then just go running and say, screw everybody else. You want to help people. So that's normal. That's supposed to be normal anyway. Some people don't do that. And again, I'm going to get into that later. But that is our natural inclination, I think. And what I find interesting about it is that we don't always know how to do that, because we don't always come out the other side. We don't always get out of that hole, We may become bitter when we watch someone else choose not to reach down and pull us out. And we may feel entitled to that person reaching out and helping us. You're right, that person probably should have done that, but you can't control them. That's their problem. That's their karma. It's not yours. So don't take that on to yourself and then say, that person didn't help me and they should have. So I'm going to become cynical and bitter and angry and I'm going to start doing the same thing. And then you become exactly like them. You get out of that hole and then you do the same thing. And then it becomes a vicious cycle, a chain event of everyone behind you making the same decision. Someone has to break that chain and say, you know what? That person didn't do the right thing, but I'm going to get out of this hole without their help, and I'm going to turn around and help the person behind me and break this cycle. Someone has to do that. And it's only free will can dictate that. You can't force someone to do that. They have to choose it. And that's why we have to start focusing less on the collective and more on our individual lives. Because when we look at the collective and what's happening in the world, it doesn't look good. It looks like there are a lot of really bad decisions being made, dangerous people in positions of power, exploiting and abusing that power, taking advantage of people, hurting people, killing people. There's poverty, homelessness, genocide. There's all sorts of horrible crap going on in the world. And it's truly disappointing and disheartening to see it all and to know that we could be doing more, but we aren't. So what exactly is the solution? Well, you have to stop thinking about it like that. What did George Carlin do? He separated himself. He said, I don't care how things turn out. I don't think that we're going to survive as a species. He made peace with the idea, and I'll be honest with you, it's a very real possibility, and we have to be okay with it. It's not a guarantee, but that is irrelevant, because your death is a guarantee. Eventually you're gonna go, you're gonna kick the can. The human race, the human species, is guaranteed, eventually at some point in the future, to become extinct, completely wiped out, not a single human being left on this planet, because that's how Earth works. It cycles things through, it phases out species. Lots of species go extinct all the time, constantly, even regardless of how we behave, because it's been happening since before we've been around. We didn't make the dinosaurs go extinct. There are a lot of things on this planet that were here and then weren't, and we can't save them all, and that's okay. One day we're going to be phased out, and you may not live to see that. You may die before that happens, and that's okay, because it doesn't matter whether or not it's going to happen. It doesn't matter whether or not you're going to be there for it, because just the same way that you are guaranteed to die at some point, so is the entire human species. And it may not happen all at once. It may be a good amount of them are taken out, but some survive and then rebuild another population. We may keep fighting to survive, like a cockroach. We may just keep coming back, but different every time, and maybe sometimes better. But as we are right now, be realistic, it's not sustainable. We exhaust the planet's resources. We're ungrateful, we're inconsiderate, we're completely void of compassion, empathy, and we generally just walk around taking up space, oxygen, breathing, drinking, eating, burning things, polluting the air, killing animals, doing horrible, horrible things. And we have no consideration of how it affects the bigger picture, how it affects the planet that we're living on, how it affects the environment or anything. We're only focused on short-term gratification, and there are too many people who think like that. There are too many people, period. There's 8 billion of us. So we have to make peace with the fact that there are not always going to be 8 billion people. That number is going to shrink big time. It is going to go down a lot to by billions. Billions of people are going to die. And it's not preventable. We just have to make peace with it. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime, but it's going to happen, and that's okay. The same way that your own death is okay, because it's inevitable. All we can focus on is making sure that on an individual level, we're spending every moment that we are alive learning, growing, evolving, and then sharing what we've learned with other people. If we can do that on an individual level, that is how we can fix the collective situation. Because if we go out and we start saying, we have to protest this and do that, people don't like being told what to do. People are using that as a distraction from their inner work. You have to do the individual work first. You have to reflect and fix your life on a personal note before you can become involved in the collective work. So, yeah, and most of the time it's out of your control. You can't control what other people do. Like I said, the person who leaves you behind in the hole, you can't force them to come back for you. You can't do anything. You just have to accept that's the decision they made. That's their karma to deal with. And sometimes there is collective karma. Sometimes we collectively, the majority of people, make bad decisions and create bad circumstances, and the rest of us become collateral damage, but we still have that individual responsibility to think about what we're adding to it, what we're bringing to the pot. So the reason George Carlin was so smart is because he decided not to have a stake in it. He saw people saying, everything will be all right if only we recycle, or if only we vote for blue or vote red, or everything will be okay if only we have more religion or less religion or this or that or whatever. You know what I mean? People always think that they're coming up with a solution. We need more education for the kids. We need this. We need that. He decided that there was no solution. He decided that we were screwed either way, that we were just a species circling the drain, and he was just going to sit back and observe in awe, in wonder, in disgust, in disappointment, and just say, you know what? Honestly, it's a little bit comical. I'm going to write a comedy show talking about what I'm looking at. And he did it. There was no need for satire. There was no need for exaggeration. He did satire. He did exaggerate, but he didn't even have to. Some of his funniest bits were just him telling the truth. But he still had a lot of good material that involved exaggeration too, like when he was talking in his final show before he died about how boring people are and how you get sucked into conversations that never seem to end. And he's talking about, oh, my wife and my kids, we were going on vacation in Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, and my wife, she found a big dinosaur turd, and I think this was maybe 5, 6 years ago. More than 6, less than 7, let's call it 6.5. And then as he's telling the story, he keeps pausing and going like, wait a minute, 9 years ago. That would have been close to Y2K, wouldn't it? Hey, you remember that? Everyone was all worried about that. Nothing ever happened. Big fuss. Nothing ever happened. And the person's just like awkwardly laughing at their own joke, and you're just kind of standing there like, oh my God, get on with it. Like, it's so uncomfortable because you can't stop them. They just keep going. And then they keep going and on and on. And he's like, oh, it turns out that the dinosaur turd was still warm. We better get the hell out of this cave. You know what? I know that I know it was 10 years ago because my wife was pregnant with our first boy, Mahmoud ibn el Said ben Salam, and he's 10 now. He's 11. He's either 11 or 5. I love that part because, I mean, first of all, the name, Mahmoud ibn el Said ben Salam, one of the things he loved pointing out is how ridiculous some of the names we come up with are. I mean, you see it when you go out in the world. People have weird names, and it changes with time. If you would never expect to find a young, attractive woman named Lillian or Priscilla or Judith. I don't know. Like that's like an older sounding name. There's just some names that just nobody uses them anymore. And it's really fascinating because he paid attention to so many things. Not everything was meaningful. Sometimes it was just something stupid like that, but he paid attention to it. He said somebody's got to have these thoughts. Apparently I've been appointed. But I have the same thoughts, not exactly the same, but similar types of thoughts where I sit and I think about things and I'm like, why is that? I was just watching Ellen DeGeneres' final show on Netflix, and she made a joke about how, having ADHD, or she was like writing the thing, she was like, beloved? Beloved? Is it beloved or beloved? And she couldn't she couldn't decide what it was, And I loved that because I could relate to that. I do the same thing where I'm like, wait a minute, how is this pronounced? What what's going on here? It's it's just there's so many weird little nuances in things that, not everyone pays it, not everyone takes the time to notice this stuff. She also made a joke. She said, something about be here and be now or something. I forgot. There was like another book written by, so I completely forgot the name. But she was like, I'm gonna write a book for people with ADD, and I'm gonna call it yeah, but what's that over there? So let me address the elephant in the room. By the way, I know Ellen is canceled. I know that um, people are saying that she was not a good boss and that she is kind of an entitled celebrity and that she's not very kind to the people in her inner circle. My opinion on that, I don't think it's any of my business. I don't know her. I never met her. I may never meet her. Um, and it's really not for me to judge someone that I don't know based on someone else's experience with them. Especially, even if it's multiple people saying something similar, that still doesn't mean anything because do you know how many times a collective people have drawn the same conclusion and the conclusion was wrong? Racism is a good example of that. There was a time that the general collective in the United States was extremely racist. And we've, for the most part, evolved past that. At least we've evolved past acknowledging that that's not good. But unfortunately, there is still racism. But we at least acknowledge that it's not a good thing. So we don't speak fondly of segregation and slavery. But here's the thing. With sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. With Ellen, I think that she I completely forgot what I was going to say. I apologize. This happens once in a while because I have too many thoughts going on at the same time, and then I forgot which one I was about to share. I need a drink. She's a human being. We all are. And we are not defined by our past. We are defined by our present and who we choose to be in the future. That doesn't mean we can avoid accountability for our past, but that also doesn't mean that you need to demand accountability. I think cancel culture should be called vulture culture, not only because it rhymes, but because that is literally what's happening. It's like vultures picking at the carcass of somebody's reputation for your own sense of moral virtue. You feel virtuous as you're doing it. You feel self-righteous. You're like, yeah, I'm a better person than you. I'm going to eat this person alive. Or you want money. You have a YouTube channel or a business of some kind where you have to write headlines for a news article, whatever it is. You are profiting off of someone's bad reputation. It's extremely exploitative, and it is the way that a vulture behaves. You just pick at the carcass. That person's reputation is already gone. You can relax. You don't have to keep reporting on it. You don't have to keep twisting the knife. People at that point have already decided how they feel, and the only reason that you would report on it is for your own BS, whatever it might be. Whether you want money, attention, you just want to feel self-righteous, you just want to feel superior, or you're just an idiot and you're not even thinking about why you're doing it. You're just sort of going along with the herd. You're just like following everybody else. You're just like, this is what people are doing. I'm just going this way. It could be a million of those things. Sometimes I think it's all of it. I think for the most part, unfortunately, it is the herd mentality. People just go with stuff. Everybody starts running in a certain direction. You're just like, okay. Nobody stops and thinks anymore. And I can't say anymore because we've never been able to do that. But nobody stops and thinks. People just don't do that. And it is disappointing. So, you know, it's unfortunate. George Carlin said, inside every cynic, there's a disappointed idealist. That's pretty much what it is. You seem cynical, but the truth is you're just disappointed. You're just like, oh, come on. I know you're better than that. What are you doing? Um, I think that Ellen is funny. I think she had a whole segment in her final show about how she's disappointed in the failed potential of seagulls. Seagulls. No, pigeons. It was pigeons. She she went on and on about pigeons and how much wasted potential they have and how disappointed she is in pigeons. I thought it was hilarious. And it bums me out to know there are people watching that, not even acknowledging the humor in it because they're sitting there thinking, what a disgusting person. She's not taking responsibility. She's not apologizing. There's something wrong with her. She's a bad person. You know, she like I don't, why do you think it's your business? This is not your life. You're not involved in this. It's so weird. It's so bizarre to me the way people treat each other. There's just a general um like epidemic or even pandemic of just hatred and negativity. People just absolutely being fueled by negativity, just going online, finding negative things to say about each other. There's a lot of unchanneled anger that we have inside of us that we do not know how to address in a proper, healthy way. We're angry at ourselves, we're angry at the world, we're just angry in general, and we don't take the time to sit and reflect and think about it and channel it into something more productive and healing, where we're saying, how can I make the world a better place today? And we instead just think, who deserves the rage that I have inside me? Who can I let this out on and treat like a punching bag? That is so, so sad. But we do it all the time. We see people using each other as punching bags constantly. People getting into fights, even literally just punching the absolute ever-loving crap out of each other. And for what? For what? What do you get out of it? Absolutely nothing. So, yeah, let's actually start. I know I'm 37 minutes in, unfortunately. I'd wasted a lot of time, but let's actually talk about the title of the video, Conservative Hypocrisies. This probably is not going to take that long because the truth is there are just a couple examples that I have off the top of my head. I'm going to go with in the order of relevance, in the order of what I think are some of the things that I'm hearing a lot lately, because we're hearing a lot about politics lately. Donald Trump just won the U.S. election, and you're hearing a lot from conservatives, and I'm hearing a lot. And I hear some arguments that are compelling if you didn't know better. You know, if you came across a video of somebody talking about something on TikTok and you were like, yeah, yeah, that's it. This guy knows what he's talking about. Excuse me. Um, and you think to yourself that you've found someone who is smart, someone who is thinking the same way you do, someone who is going to save you from whatever problems you feel you're affected by. And the truth is that you're probably just listening to somebody who's really uneducated themselves and unfortunately really good at creating a narrative and making it believable and manipulating people. So as I come across these videos, am disappointed by how in how well worded they are, I guess, you know, because or how convincing they are. That's the word I'm thinking of. I got a little distracted picking skin under my finger. I apologize. But what's that over there? Like, I don't know. I'm not diagnosed with anything. I don't know that I would be. I might be on some kind of spectrum somewhere. But I don't really care because I'm okay. I get by. I function. And if I can avoid medications, I would like to, you know, if it's not a problem, I think I'll be fine. So all you really have to do is not judge people. If you're not judging me, then we don't have any problems. If you're understanding that I have good intentions and you're willing to like work with me a little bit and know that I'm not always fully there, even though I try to be, just work with me. Don't make me feel bad about it. I had a friend recently who made me feel very bad about it, and I'm no longer friends with that person. And this only happened 2 weeks ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. And just every now and then I hear someone go through something similar, and I'm like, see, that person, gets it. That person would not make me feel judged. But the ironic thing is this person had a lot of like medications and diet, had a lot of issues himself. And I don't know if he was like, if there was a part of him that was like jealous of me, you know, or I don't know what it was. It was dressed up as concern, but it read as judgment, and I don't appreciate that. I don't like being looked down at or condescended or anything. Nobody does. So, it just is what it is. I didn't even end the friendship. All I did was stand up for myself, and then he decided that he didn't want to hear that. So, apparently I'm not allowed to have boundaries, right? Good Lord. I don't know where these people come from. I swear there's a factory producing people who are just there to piss you off, just get under your skin, make you doubt yourself, make you feel bad about yourself. And you just have to learn how to keep shutting the door on these people and saying, no, 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 no. If you're not going to make me feel better, I have enough shit making me feel bad. I don't need more. I don't need an additional thing making me feel bad. So let's not with that. But yeah, so regarding politics and, conservative arguments, I think there are a lot of compelling arguments made for Donald Trump, and, from conservatives, if you listen to what they're saying. But you have to be uneducated on some level, or completely tuning out your intuition, as I mentioned. You'd have to be the person who would hear "move your bed" and not do it. And I apologize if you skipped some of this video. This is referring to something I said earlier. So, yeah, unfortunately, people do not possess great critical thinking skills, which I think the reason for that is that as George Carlin would say, the owners of this country, they have set things up in a way where the table is tilted and everything is about profit and commerce and capitalism and all of these things that are about taking advantage of the working class. And they don't care about homeless people. They don't care about how their actions affect others. All they care about is increasing their own power, their own wealth, at the expense of everybody else. Now, personally, I'm a bit of, I guess you could say, an anarchist, because I think anarchy is about not believing in authority, believing that authority, even as a concept, is a little bit idiotic. And that is something I can get behind, because I only recently started thinking about it this way, but on some level, we all believe that authority is necessary. We believe that we need authority in the world. We need authority figures. We need people who are in charge. But why? Why do we believe that? Have we even considered the alternative? The alternative is not chaos. The alternative is not everybody running around with no one in charge. The alternative is people that are there to protect you, people that are actually making a sacrifice to take on a role of protecting you. Like parents, for example. This is a perfect example because everybody can relate to having a parent or being a parent. So when you are a parent, you often think of yourself as the authority figure in the household, the authority over your child. Your child sees you as an authority figure, and you want them to. You want them to trust you. You want to use punishment and reward. You want to convince them to trust you by teaching them that bad things happen when they don't trust you. And you want them to see you as an authority figure. Generally, this is what parents try to do. But think about what you're actually doing. You brought a child into the world, and now that child is your responsibility. It's your responsibility because you brought them into the world to protect them, keep them safe, and make sure that you're giving them everything that they need. And that is a burden on you. That distracts you from your own life. You can't just have a life and have a full-time job and then also be a parent. Parenting is in itself a full-time job, and I highly recommend, if you're going to become a parent, that you set aside a lot of time to be there for your kids. Do not be a passive parent. Don't just, have a kid just because it's what everyone else is doing and then still constantly be going to work and then let a babysitter raise your kids, or let the teachers in preschool and kindergarten and all that raise your kids for you. You have to be there for your kids. If you can't afford to, you should not be having kids, period. We live in a world that tries so hard to encourage people to have kids. Again, because of capitalism, because of profit, more kids equals more workers. More workers equals more people making them money. So these big corporations, I think there are like 6 corporations that control about 90% of the news and information that you get to hear, which is insane. Um, only 6. That's wild. I think I don't remember all 6 of them. I know one of them is AT&T, one of them is Disney. Um, just interesting, just food for thought there. But it's wild that was even ever a statistic, even if it isn't true today. It's insane. But in the age of the internet, um, we do have a lot more access to information, but we also have you know social media platforms that control algorithms and control what pops up and what you see. And we have a lot of idiots who have been indoctrinated to spew out their dogma and these untrue narratives. So just spewing out rhetoric that is designed to keep people controlled. It's sort of like you teach someone something, then they go out and teach it, and then they become the teacher, even though they're the manipulated originally. So you should, on some level, it's like, oh, it's sad this person's indoctrinated, but also they're just as bad now because they're doing it. They're continuing the work. Um, they may not have the same intentions because they're manipulated themselves, but the same intentions as the original person who knew what they were doing. Um, but it's still just as problematic as far as the person hearing it is concerned, because it spreads like a virus. Misinformation, disinformation spreads like a virus. The difference between misinformation and disinformation is intention. Disinformation is information that was put out where the person saying it knew it wasn't true. Misinformation is just where the person saying it thought it was true, but it wasn't. Um, so that's the difference. Most of the time, misinformation starts with disinformation, and then it becomes misinformation as other people continue to spread it. But, you know, usually the origin of something untrue is that someone was intentionally lying, unfortunately. But, um, there's a really good show called Poker Face where the main character, played by Natasha Lyonne, can always tell, like 100% of the time, um, whenever someone is intentionally lying. And it's a like a murder mystery solving show. It's really good. I recommend watching it. It's on Peacock. Um, sorry, just the way my brain works. So, okay, where was I? Talking about people spreading misinformation, people being gullible. How did I get on that? Let's backtrack a little bit. Conservative hypocrisies. So, unfortunately, the biggest conservative hypocrisy is that I feel like this is wrong. I haven't finished whatever thought I was saying before. I feel like I'm skipping over something, and I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna finish it. I just got to try and remember it. Let me have a drink of water while I do that. Oh yeah, okay, now I remember. I was talking about the reason that there's so much misinformation, which is, these companies trying to control what people have access to. And that, as people are spreading this, sometimes people find themselves uneducated and listening to something that they think makes sense and sounds good, but they're ignoring their intuition, or they're ignoring their logic. There's a lack of information to base their decision off of. So I want to point out some hypocrisies. So, let's let's start with a really big issue. I mean, I don't know how big this issue really is, but the trans debate I think is pretty popular, and it seems to be relevant. I keep hearing news about it. People keep arguing, and this has been an excuse me, this has been an issue for a long time. Sorry again. People people arguing about, should trans people be allowed in the bathroom? Should trans people be allowed to play in sports and stuff like that? And I just want to say this is an issue that has been going on for a long time. Um, Oftentimes we try to target an underdog, a minority group, whether it be women, the LGBT community, people of different, ethnic or racial backgrounds, whatever, the situation is. People try so hard to marginalize and categorize people and then turn these groups against each other. And they do it every time they do it really well. They disguise it really well because historically you look back and you would think, how were we ever, maybe you don't question this because it looks like people aren't actually looking into how these things happen in the first place, but maybe you should ask yourself, how were we ever stupid enough to believe that racism was a good thing, that segregation and slavery were completely morally justifiable things? There was, I mean, you could say, oh, well, it's ridiculous to say that half the country, that over 70 million people who voted for Donald Trump are stupid. But think about what you're saying. If your argument is true, first of all, you're saying that the other half of the country, also 70 million people, are stupid for voting for Kamala Harris. So, you know, just by saying, how could it be a cult? Or how could we be that stupid if there's that many of us? You are literally pointing out that there is almost an equal number of people who you think are stupid. And second of all, do you not realize that there was a time when more than half the country, even the presidents and everybody pretty much agreed that slavery and segregation were good things. And we had to have a civil war where half the country was, the North and the South were fighting each other over this? That's insane. That wasn't even that long ago. It was way more recent than you want to believe. And segregation was as recent as, like, your grandparents were probably kids during that time, maybe even teenagers. People that are alive today grew up when that was normal. My own grandma, um, you know, she, like, her dad generally was a pretty good person, but apparently he hated black people and just like actively just talked about like they were subhuman. How do we get there? How do we get to a point where we draw a conclusion like that? And how do we not see the similarities in the way that people talk about trans people? People talk about um, the LGBT community in general. I know that I'm specifically focused on trans people because they're getting the most heat right now, but people say the same stuff about gay people. And this is why I want to point out hypocrisy. So here are some of the hypocrisies regarding this. First of all, conservatives don't care about women. They don't. They only, this is what's interesting. They only care about women's rights. We've been talking for years, years and years and years. We've been saying women do not feel safe around men. Women would rather run into a bear in the woods than run into a man. And we've been saying this for a long time. And men say, hey, why do you hate men? You're a man hater. It's not my fault I'm a man. And they get angry and they get aggressive and then they wonder why no one wants to date them. But I digress. My point is, we've been asking you to acknowledge the BS that women are put through by men for a long time. And you only do it in the context of making, demonizing trans women. Suddenly, magically, you're on our side. You're like, actually, men are dangerous and problematic, and men are horrible, evil rapists and violent. women abusers, and women are right to want to hide from us and have their own spaces. And now there are men dressing up as women so that they can invade women's spaces and make women feel unsafe. It's like, oh, suddenly you believe us? Suddenly you're okay with demonizing men as long as it's in the context of demonizing trans women? The truth is, the kinds of things that trans women experience are very similar, if not identical, or even worse sometimes, to the things that cisgender women experience. I have a trans friend who she was walking home the other night and a car started following her, and he said, how long of a walk do you have ahead of you? Do you need a ride? She ignored him, kept her head down, kept walking, and he kept following her and kept pestering her, and eventually he had to get chased off by another car. She has to carry, like, you know, like weapons in, in like a purse or something to defend herself, and she wants to learn self-defense. And I encourage that. For the love of God, learn self-defense. Learn how to protect yourself, because you're on your own. As much as I hate to say it, I don't see a lot of women aren't banding together and standing up for each other. I never see men standing up for women. If a guy is with his bros and one of his bros starts acting really violent and hostile and a little bit like pervy and is saying like, rape jokes or even literally trying to rape a woman or attack a woman, he doesn't stop his friend and protect the woman. He defends his friend. He says, "Hey, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a guy. Boys will be boys." Men stand up for each other in their disgusting, horrible, violent behavior, and women do not stick up for each other. Women attack each other constantly. Trans women are not your enemy. They are your ally. And let me explain why that is. Because we say that gender is not a social construct. Gender is defined by what's between your legs. First of all, that doesn't account for people who are intersex, which, if the outdated term is hermaphrodite. If you are born and you have, a mix of chromosomes and you just, your body's kind of a mess, what are you then? Those same people would tell you genital mutilation is the answer. They'll just decide what you are at birth and cut off the parts that, maybe shouldn't be there. And they also, circumcise men, which is so weird and barbaric. I've never understood that you would look at a child, an innocent little baby, and think, this perfect little thing needs one little adjustment. Hand me some scissors. Like, what in the world could possibly drive a person to do that besides indoctrination, cult-like thinking, religion? And then it started out as religion, and then it turned into like pseudoscience. They say that there's like that it's cleaner or that it's healthier. All of that is BS. Trust me, I've looked into it. It's BS. You're literally just mutilating your kids' genitals for no reason, and then you go on the internet and then you hate on trans people and say that trans people are mutilating their genitals. I'm sorry, they're adults choosing to do what they want to their body. People have cosmetic procedures all the time. It's none of your business. If someone wants to get their makeup done or have plastic surgery to change, they have a crooked nose like this, and they want to get surgery to make it look like this, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you might feel more comfortable around them if they fix their nose. You know what I mean? Like, there are people who, you see people who, and these are the same people, by the way. Like, I guarantee you, it's the same type of person who hates on trans people that would see someone with a deformity and think, oh, suddenly it's not, oh, let's be natural. If you see a woman who has a penis and she was born that way, she didn't have any surgeries, she didn't change her gender, that's just the way she is. You would call her a hermaphrodite, and you would, start thinking of her as weird or a freak or a circus show. You would be uncomfortable around her. So, and she didn't have any surgery, she didn't do anything. So there is hypocrisy. There's inconsistency and dishonesty in the rhetoric. And another issue is manhood. It's like a cult, because they get to decide who is a man. They say gender is not a social construct. Gender is defined by what's between your legs when they're trying to demonize trans people. But in any other context, if you are trying to be seen as manly, they'll tell you you're a pussy, they'll call you a woman, they'll tell you that you're not a real man. Suddenly, Gender is not defined by what's between your legs. They say that, I mean, look at Harry Styles. He is seen wearing dresses, and they tell him he's not a real man. But let's say one day he came out and he said, I'm a woman. Suddenly they would tell him, no, you're a man. So that's what I mean. There's inconsistency. They say gender's not a social construct, and yet they try to tell you what makes a man and what makes a woman based on their own opinions and societal standards. They don't actually base it on biology. They don't give a crap about biology. And as I just explained, biology is kind of a mess in the first place. And they don't want to hear that. You know, it's reality, but they don't want to hear it. So I think if you are rejected from the men cult and they tell you that you're not a real man, as far as I'm concerned, you are feminine enough to be at risk from those men, and you deserve to be in a safe space from them. Instead of dividing it as men and women, you could think of it as hostile, toxic masculinity mentality versus people who are just trying to survive and take care of themselves and defend themselves. Toxic masculinity versus the divine feminine, however you want to categorize it or whatever you want to call it, because they decide who's allowed in their group. If you are not, I mean, it's whatever. They come up with random things. They'll tell you that drinking lemonade is gay. You know what I mean? Like, weird, random stuff that they come up with is just so strange to me. But, you know, they decide who's allowed in, who's allowed to be considered a man. And there are a lot of people that they say are not real men. They're not allowed in that group. And this, like, bro culture, it's so toxic. I have a friend who was, he's not trans, but he considered it for a while. He wondered if he was. And he was interested in the social dynamics, and he was going around thinking of himself as an incel and wondering why he couldn't get a girlfriend. And he was going around trying to say, like, I'm not violent or dangerous or scary. I'm pretty, like, you know, harmless looking, and you know, I don't look scary, I don't act scared, you know, why would a woman be intimidated by me? And then he's, you know, he had long hair to begin with, so then he decided that he might be trans, so he changed his name, and he started, you know, socially transitioning. He started wearing dresses and stuff and going out and just tapping into his femininity, which everyone is allowed to do. You can dress however you want. You can tap into feminine or masculine energies at any time. You can do whatever you want. It's your body. You can dress however you want. It's not a big deal. It really isn't. But he was experimenting with that, and he went out in public, and he was fascinated by how differently he was treated. He immediately felt he was surrounded by women who wanted to just be his friend, and who you know, felt more comfortable around him because he was dressed like a woman, which automatically disqualifies him from being part of that toxic masculinity mentality, because they would not want him, you know. And if he's comfortable enough walking around dressed like that, that already says that he's put a target on his back. He is now someone who is vulnerable to getting attacked and raped and bullied and you know, beaten to death. And so women see an ally in him because of that. So, you know, they see trans women as allies because they experience the same kind of discrimination and bullying. And that's why it's okay to allow trans women into women's spaces, especially a bathroom. They just want to pee, man. Like, it's so bizarre to think that if a man wanted to rape a woman, he would have to dress up like a woman and do it in a woman's bathroom. Men rape women all the time, and conservatives never gave a crap until it became about hating trans people. It's insane. It's so insane, and it's extremely hypocritical. And then suddenly being gay is okay, because they hated gays for a long time, very, very long time. And suddenly, gays became allies because they could turn the gays against trans people. They could say, okay, well, at least you're not that crazy. But what happens when we, you know, if hypothetically we completely annihilated trans people from existence, we outlawed it entirely, we nipped that in the bud, then what? Do you think they're going to come for gay marriage? Do you think they're going to try to outlaw homosexuality? Do you think they're going to try? Absolutely. They're never going to stop trying, because this is not about logic. This is about brainwashing and turning people against each other. And if you can convince an entire population that segregation and slavery are good, you can convince people of anything. If you can as kids, this is something George Carlin said, if you can convince a child that there's an invisible man in the sky watching everything you do, taking notes, commit, um, you're committing thought crime, and he's convicting you of thought crime. All these things. If you can convince a child of that, you can convince that person of anything as they get older. If they'll believe that, if they bite that bait, they're going for anything. There's nothing you can't tell them that they won't believe, um, and that's terrifying. It should scare people, but it doesn't, because people are easily led, and people just people like hatred. Like I said, there's that unchanneled anger. People just looking for a punching bag. And this is true on both sides of the political spectrum, but what's also true of both sides of the political spectrum is they're being taken advantage of by the elite, by the rich, the owners, the corporations, the billionaires. And yet they just voted a billionaire into office. And it reminds me of something George Carlin said, oddly enough, about Bill Clinton, but it completely applies to Donald Trump. He said Americans like their bullshit right out front where they can get a good, strong whiff of it. And he said that's why they elected and reelected Bill Clinton, because they said, you know something, at least he's honest. At least he's honest about being full of shit. He said, hey, everybody, I'm completely full of shit, and how do you like that? And that's what Donald Trump did. He came on, and he just has been caught in so many lies and inconsistencies that I can't even begin to cover it. That man says the most insane crap you could ever imagine, has made it so clear that he is an extremely radical right-wing maniac who wants to dismantle everything that we have in place and just build a Republican, I guess a regime. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but he wants to just make everything about him and his own benefit, benefiting other rich people, and he does it by lying to the American public and not even being shameful about it. He's never claimed that he's like an honest, faithful guy, and a lot of people who vote for him don't even think that. They vote for him because they think that he's a mess. He's different. They think he's anti-establishment. He's not like the rest of them. You're damn right. He's not like the rest of them. Because this is the thing. One thing George Carlin said that I agree with is that no matter who you vote for, it's not the solution. Because if voting was all it took to fix the problems that we have, the owners would not allow that. They wouldn't let you vote if it was actually going to fix things. But even though voting isn't going to fix things, it's also still worth doing, because just because voting doesn't mean everything's going to get better, doesn't mean things aren't going to get worse. You have two options. And I agree, it's ridiculous to think that you have two options. You should be able to vote for more than two people. But it is what it is. There shouldn't be a red and blue party, but it's put there to give you the illusion that you have freedom of choice. And again, as George Carlin pointed out, there are a million choices in other areas. You could get like 30 different flavors of ice cream, but only two president options. That's all you have. But the reality of the situation is, even though neither of them are actually going to make things better, it's very likely that one of them is going to actively make things a lot worse. And why would you allow that? Why would you be complacent in allowing that? Kamala Harris wasn't going to fix our country and be the savior that we've always needed, but she would have been historically the first female president. What a good precedent that sets. You know, what an important message to send to young women around the country. And a lot of her narrative, regardless of whether she actually believed it or not, was helpful for people and hopeful. She said a lot of good things. I don't care if she's a genuine person. If you expect your politicians to be genuine, you don't even understand the first thing about how this shit works. But then you look at someone like Donald Trump, an absolute pile of trash, disgusting human being, repugnant in every way imaginable, and you think he's the savior? You think he's gonna fix things? She would have maybe at best kept things the way they are. He is actively trying to make things 1,000 times worse, and people have been tricked into believing he's going to fix everything. What proof do you have that he's going to do that? Just saying that his first presidency was good? No, it wasn't. Were you there for that? Did you fall asleep for 4 years? I remember every day of his presidency from 2016 to 2020, and I remember it being a waking nightmare. It was awful. He was constantly making insane decisions, constantly making a complete ass of himself, and showing other countries that he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And I was afraid that he was going to start a war every other day. And it all ended with him handling COVID horribly. He allowed COVID to spread. He told everyone that it wasn't a big deal, made insane decisions, tried to convince people to inject themselves with soap and farm animal deworming medication, and just said insane shit every other day. And no one who worked with him during his first term has anything nice to say about him, even his vice president. And you know what his vice president did? He confirmed the results of the election. He simply did his role and didn't say Donald Trump was cheated out of winning this election. I think there's a lot of evidence that Donald Trump cheated in 2024, and I don't see Democrats acting like this. I don't see anybody telling Kamala Harris not to do her job and hand the presidency over to Donald Trump. I don't see anybody, starting a riot and talking about storming the Capitol. But Donald Trump, he allowed all of that to happen, never apologized or took responsibility for it. In fact, he even tried to protect the people who were in the January 6th Capitol storming incident. And, what's confusing is they say that that they staged that, that the people doing it were in on it, that it was a way to make him look bad. I'm sorry, what would have been the point of that? He already lost the election. It was about to be a peaceful transfer of power. What would they have to gain by doing that? He literally said that we were going to go to the Capitol and we were going to show them that they can't do this. And yet he's not responsible for what they did. He said it wasn't my job to keep it secure. That was Nancy Pelosi's job. Dude, you were literally the president up until that day. You were the president. What do you mean it wasn't your responsibility to keep the Capitol safe? What the fuck is wrong with you? He's completely insane. Completely insane. And he has convinced over 70 million people that he's this genius savior. I have an ex-friend who voted for him because apparently he thought that among the two options, he was the one who was less likely to lead us into a third world war. I think it is the complete opposite. But hey, to be fair, if you genuinely believed that electing Kamala Harris was going to get us all killed, I can understand why you didn't do it. But then I paid a little closer attention to him and I realized it's more than that. It's more than just he thought that Donald Trump was going to be the one to not get us all killed. Because he tried saying, neither of them are perfect, but you just have to pick the one that's better and blah, blah, blah. But then you keep listening and you realize, no, he's just a plain old boring conservative. That's it. Because I did pay attention to the things he was posting and the things he was saying, and it didn't really line up with the things he was telling me privately. It was like he was trying to get me to like him, but the truth is, he was just a conservative to a T. Super religious, yammering on about God and also being hypocritical at that. Not following any of God or Jesus's teachings and just like ridiculous stuff. It's so unfortunate. Saying, I don't know why, people are ending friendships with me over politics. It's so ridiculous. It's like, oh, I don't know, maybe you just voted for someone who's actively demonized them and turned them into a target, Puerto Ricans and immigrants, and especially illegal immigrants and trans people, they're all targets now. They've all experienced an increase in discrimination. I just read a story the other day about a gay man who was like lured out of his apartment and beaten to death. Or not even an apartment, it was like a campus at college, and beaten to death. That's what I remember reading anyway. There has been an increase in misogyny. A lot of people started saying, your body, my choice. Absolutely disgusting. All because of the results of an election. The guy's not even in office yet. And he's already had a massive, undeniable ripple effect on society. He is empowering people to be hateful, bigoted, homophobic, transphobic, sexist, racist, xenophobic. It's disgusting. And you can't say that he isn't racist when he tries to convince the American public that foreigners, people who you could perceive as, being from somewhere else, might be trying to eat your dogs and cats, you know, that they're from a floating pile of garbage. These are disgusting things to say about other people. It's not funny. Um, and think about how this might actually affect these people when they're in public. To feel like just by going out in the world, there's people that are going to be looking at them and thinking, "Ugh, disgusting. Are you here legally?" You look at a homeless person and you say, so lazy, get a job. Um, you look at a mother who is desperate and needs medical treatment, and you just say, it's your responsibility to give birth, even if it kills you, even if it's your rapist's kid, even if you're 11 years old. You know, it's disgusting. And again, with the abortion thing, hypocrisy at its finest. They only care about protecting the lives of innocent children in the context of forcing women to give birth. Giving birth is not something to take lightly. It changes the woman's body permanently. It changes her hormones. She might not even survive it. It is an extraordinarily life-changing experience that cannot be reversed. Once you go through that, that's it. You've given birth, you've been pregnant, you're different. You're going to go through postpartum potentially if you survive. And death rate is fairly low, I'll grant you that, but it's not zero. It happens. Women die giving birth. It happens more than you want to admit. And it not if you counted the women who've committed suicide too, just from like postpartum depression, I don't think people even take statistics on that. I haven't seen any, but I'm sure it happens. I'm sure as shit that it happens. Um, and so many things that just no one talks about, but they're horrible. So there's no minimizing that. Your body is forever changed. You're never going to look the same. You're going to have stretch marks. You're never nothing is ever going to be the same again. And to tell someone that they have a moral obligation to do that to themselves is insane. That's their body. That's not just a vessel for a child to be born through. That's another human being with a right to choose if they want to put themselves through that. And if they choose it, fantastic. That's their choice. And they're really brave for doing it, honestly. But to tell them that they have to, I can't get behind that. I just can't. And your reason for it is so inconsistent because you say it's about protecting children. Well, where are you for all the homeless children, for the starving children? Where are you for the children in school where you're trying to take away their education and you're trying to defund schools and you're trying to, take them out of school and make schools out to be this place where children are being indoctrinated in to be gay or something, and what about the gay kids? They exist. Every gay adult was a child at some point, and there are a lot of kids who don't know that that's even a thing. When I grew up, I didn't know that existed. I would have loved if that was something that was actually taught in school, if I could learn about it in a clinical sense and not just have it be something that people talk about in society like it's some weird stigmatized thing. I grew up in a household that was very open and accepting, and yet I still found it really, really hard to come to terms with my sexuality because I could feel, I could just feel the stigma. I could feel that if I accepted it about myself, it would make me weird, and it was something that I felt very suffocated by. I couldn't control it. I couldn't do anything about it, and it was scary. And I felt like I was throwing myself out to the wolves. I felt like I was jumping under a spotlight and, like a helicopter, like a searchlight, you know what I mean? Like I felt like I was exposed and vulnerable and helpless and scared. And this is coming from an accepting home and family. That's how bad it was with people who would not have even judged me for coming out. And when I did come out, um, I just remember feeling so uncomfortable hearing even the word gay used in reference to myself by family, to have them start seeing me that way, to just have them categorize me as a gay man when I don't know what assumptions they have. I don't know what preconceived ideas they have about gay people in their head that now they're going to start associating with me. that made me so uncomfortable. It felt personal, it felt private. It was like that, this is mine, this is my thing. That's how horribly we've treated gay people historically. That's how horribly we've treated homosexuality as a concept, is that even if you grow up in an accepting household, you still are that afraid to come to terms with it, and you become so nervous. And now I see people talking about stuff like that being taught in schools and people becoming more accepting. And I think that's a wonderful thing. You know, I'm cheering for the gay kids out there that are feeling like they're not alone and like it is not a big deal and they can just, be, whatever they are. But then I see people saying that that's inappropriate and kids don't need to learn about stuff like that. And it's, even other gay people buy into this bullshit and they say, oh, well, I don't know if kids should learn about that. Well, guess what? Kids learn about heterosexuality from the time they're born. They see straight couples kissing everywhere they look. It's not a foreign concept. Your teacher might have a picture of her husband or his wife. And you might see your teacher pregnant and talking about how she's going to give birth, and that implies sex. And yet we don't teach our kids about sex, even though they're going to learn eventually, and it's really just a clinical, objective, matter-of-fact thing. There's no reason to stigmatize it or make it weird. That's another thing people do, is they stigmatize sex. I find that so odd. It just is what it is. It's just how life is created. Why would you want to keep that from someone? At what point did anybody decide that that was inappropriate? People are so weird. People come up with the weirdest conclusions and weird ideas and narratives, and nobody questions it. Nobody says, wait, why though? They're just like, we don't talk about that. We don't use certain words around kids. We don't say ass or shit or, whatever. Like, why though? They're going to learn the word eventually, and they're going to use it in their adult life. Who is it offending besides people who are going to learn it eventually? Kids swear around each other because kids know what swear words are. Kids know the words and they use them around each other. Adults use them around each other. The only time nobody swears is when adults and kids are together. Kids pretend they don't swear, adults pretend they don't swear. But as soon as they're not around each other, then, and kids are with other kids and adults are with other adults, then they just say whatever they want. So why is it that adults and kids, when they're in the same room, have to pretend they don't swear? It's weird as shit. I don't understand it. And I don't know why no one questions it. These words are genuinely harmless. It's not even like they're slurs. It's not like they have some negative history or anything. It's just a more emphatic way of saying something. It's really, really strange. But hey, it is what it is. People are stupid. I guess we already knew this. And regarding conservative hypocrisies, I think I addressed pretty much everything I wanted to say. I don't think that they are consistent in the reasons for things, so call them out on it. When they say they want to say that they care about misogyny, and they want to say that they care about the way men treat women when they're talking about shitting on trans women, call them out and say, are you consistent in this area of your life? Do you actually consistently believe that men are violent and dangerous against women and we need to protect women from men? J.K. Rowling, for example, she does this. She's a TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist is what that stands for. So, is she consistent in that? Does she actually talk about the real threats that women experience and the kinds of things that women go through that that put them in danger, and the ways in which they've been discriminated against socially and historically and just in their everyday life, the struggles that a woman goes through? Are they truly consistent in that, or do they make excuses for men? Do they try to justify men's behavior? Do they try to minimize how bad misogyny is? And do they just not even talk about the real issues because all they talk about is trans women are a problem because trans women aren't real women. Trans women are just men trying to get closer to women. It's a bullshit narrative, and deep down they know it, and they're just trying to find a punching bag to let their hatred out on. I'm convinced that that's what it is. And like the people who are obsessed with unborn fetuses, let me ask you, are you consistent in every area of your life? Do you really practice being pro-life? Are you against the death penalty? Are you actively fighting to save the lives of as many people as possible? Or do you say that homeless people deserve to be homeless because they're lazy and they need to have a job? And do you say, immigrants and illegal immigrants and, anybody who looks foreign in some way, they should go back to their country because their human rights are not worth shit? Um, and all of these things that people say about the underdog, the minority, the marginalized groups. Um, are you truly consistent, or do you have a lot of hatred and prejudice, and you're just trying to be morally virtuous when in reality you're just virtue signaling? You're not actually consistent in your beliefs. You're inconsistent. You're hypocritical. Um, and it's unfortunate because all I really want and all I ever ask for, all I fight for, is freedom. I want people to be free to be themselves, to live their life the way that they want to live it, to be free of judgment, to be free of control and oppression. And I see that as a tangible goal. I think it's possible. I don't think it's a guarantee because obviously it depends on other people's free will, and people are notoriously stupid and misuse their free will. But I think that that is an ideal worth fighting for. And, you know, I think that if we just do what I said earlier, focus on your personal life. Look inward first before you start looking outward and judging other people. Do your own healing. When you get healed, you hear things differently. It's not the same because you're no longer looking at the world through this desperate lens of anger. You're now looking at the world feeling like you're okay. And then your only goal becomes, how can I heal other people? How can I put more light and positivity into the world? How can I take care of people who are in need of care instead of focusing on how can I bring other people down? And I know a lot of people who are pro-life, focused on aborted fetuses and all that, they like to say that they care about protecting innocence, and they think that they're channeling positive energy, and they like to think that they're protecting, they're fighting against murder. But let me ask you this: if it were really that simple, why would there be so many people against you? Most people agree that murder is wrong. So if there are such a large number of people telling you that abortion and murder are not the same thing, shouldn't that give you pause? Why is it that there might be so many people telling you that they're not the same thing? Because it's not that simple. Because it's not just about you and the fetus you're trying to save. There is another human being in the way who you have to go through to get to that fetus, and she matters. She matters. Her will matters. Her body matters. And that fetus should not be considered more important than she is. But that's what women have historically been brought up to believe, is that it's their job to be pregnant, it's their job to give birth, it's their job to take care of their husbands and their babies, and to slave away and do, 200% of the work and get like almost nothing in compensation. They, if anything, just get beaten to death. That happens a lot more often than you'd like to admit. Husbands murder their wives, husbands murder their children, because it's easy to them. It's easier than divorce. Here's a statistic that may shock you. A psychic medium, a friend of mine, she gives readings and travels, and when she does this, she said that about 90% of her clients are female, and the 10% that are male, she said that the females, oftentimes she's telling them that their partner is cheating or something, like that they need to leave their partner, and they always are asking about their relationships. They're like, oh, my husband, I love my husband. And then the 10% of her clients that are male, they come up and they say, hey, are things gonna work out with this girl that I've been seeing? My wife and kids don't know about her, but I just want to know if are things gonna work out with this girl. And the psychic, she says, well, karma is coming for you because what you're doing is immoral and unethical. And he goes, oh, does that mean things aren't going to work out with me and this girl? Is something bad going to happen to me? At no point does he ever say, oh my God, my poor wife and kids. I wonder if what I'm doing is unethical because it's harming other people. They don't think like that. They don't. It's unfortunately a reality. And you know, statistics show how often men murder their wife and kids. It's insane. It's truly insane. Women, under Donald Trump, you do not want to get married. Project 2025 has a lot of stuff about marriage in it. Do some research. One of the things they want to get rid of is something called no fault divorce. They basically want to make it where it's just harder for women to get divorced. You kind of have to be like proving, with evidence that there was infidelity in some way. You can't just get a divorce because you simply want to. Um, and that just makes it easier for men to keep women under their control. And if men decide that they want to end the relationship, they don't get a divorce. They just kill you. And they get away with it because men are never held accountable. Time and time again, we just keep proving that women are going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting, and they're just going to keep doing twice the work for half the reward. And men are going to keep taking over, getting the job without doing anything. Donald Trump getting elected over Kamala Harris is a perfect example of that. I'm sorry, my dog is barking. I have to go. But yeah, overqualified women getting their jobs stolen by underqualified men. That's the story we're living in. Have a good night, everyone. I'll talk to you later.